welcome to 10 Minutes with the Boys. I'm Harrison.
And I'm Alex.
Today we have a special guest interview with famous German novelist Erich Maria Remarque regarding his life accomplishments and life experiences.
Let's send it over to Joey with him right now.
I'm here with world-renowned author and writer of All Quiet on the Western Front, Erich Maria Remarque.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Good to see you. And we're here to talk about his life. We're going to start today by talking about a little bit of his pre-life and life before World War I.
Well, I was born in 1908 in a small town called Osnabrück, Germany. We grew up in I guess what you could call a poor family. We were all Catholic, and we have French ancestors.
You know, coming to this interview, I was told that you have a real strong bond with your mother and how she really paved the way for you in your life. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, as a young kid, she told me that she wanted me to pursue a path in education and to go to school and go to college and become an elementary school
Thank you,
teacher.
Eric, for coming out to this interview. It was a great time. I really appreciated it. It was a pleasure meeting you. We'll continue this interview with my colleague Xander soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us about your World War I experience.
I began behind the Eros front as a sapper who builds dugouts, bunkers, and pillboxes, and I also had to avoid sniper fire and enemy
Your
shelling.
experience at the Battle of Flanders.
Well, my company advanced to Flanders, and at the battle, I experienced some of the most savage fighting of World War I there.
You suffered major wounds at this battle.
Oh, yes, it is. I suffered shrapnel wounds there while carrying a friend named Trotsky out of enemy fire, and he eventually died, and he's kind of like the fictional character Cat in my book, All Quiet on the Western Front, and I was also put in a German hospital after that event.
You in the hospital and after you recovered from most of your injuries.
Well, in the hospital, obviously I was recuperating, and I also began writing music, and I spent a lot of time on that. And later, I suffered many injuries, and including grenade splinters in the neck and injuries to the left knee and right wrist. 4 days before the armistice, I was declared fit.
Like to you losing your mother.
Shortly after being drafted, I was transferred to Call, and here I visited my mother, who had just recently been hospitalized for cancer. And shortly after that, she died on September 19, 1917, right after I returned home.
Can you explain some of the connections between fictional character Paul and your experience in World War I?
Well, to start off, both Paul, the character, and I were both drafted at the age of 19. And secondly, Paul's company had to lay barbed wire down on the front, and they had to avoid heavy artillery fire at that time. And much like my experience, as a sapper, I had to avoid sniper fire. Next, both Paul and I's mothers were dying of cancer during the war, and we came home and returned from the front often to see our family and to help out. The last main connection is between Kat and my friend Trotsky, who we both carried our friends off on the battlefield, and they eventually
Tell us a little about the education that you received before you entered the war.
Well, I attended two primary schools called Johannesschule and Domschule. At Johannesschule, I joined the church choir, and I developed a deep passion for literature, and also music became a great part of my life, and I enjoy that still today.
Tell us a little about how you became drafted into the war.
Well, at the age of 19, I was drafted in the German Army with all my classmates from the Catholic Teacher Seminar, and unfortunately not everyone made it out, but that's, I guess, reality of war.
Tell us a little about the troubles that you experienced after the war.
Well, right after the war, I became disillusioned to it, and I didn't trust or have confidence in the rulers who executed the war, and I just felt that it was unnecessary. I became a pacifist, and that ultimately kind of hurt my reputation. And I also suffered from trauma and a lot of anxiety and unease.
So we talked about a little about your long-term troubles after the war. What was your life like immediately after the war?
Well, right when the war ended, I was discharged from the Army as a private, and because I just thought the war was unnecessary and I wasn't proud of it, I renounced all my medals and decorations that I received from the war, including an Iron Cross, and I also became unsettled in my life, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it because the front was just, that was like my lifestyle, and I didn't know how to live the civilization.
After you overcame your anxiety from after war, what did you do with your life?
I went to a Catholic seminary for teachers to prepare for an education and to become a teacher eventually. And I was a substitute teacher and at a school. And unfortunately, I was accused of siding with a left-wing Bolshevik revolution. And from that point on, I decided that education wasn't giving me a career path, and I needed to find another one.
You mentioned that teaching wasn't for you. What kind of occupation did you decide to pursue after you figured that out?
I actually took up many jobs, from being a clerk at a store to stone cutter and also a gravestone salesman. And I struggled to obtain a career and my final choice on what I was going to do in life, and none of those really worked out for me, so fortunately I started writing.
Obviously, we all know that you're a very talented writer. How did you develop these writing skills?
Well, I decided to refine my skills, and as a child I had these skills earlier and at my school that I developed, and so I decided to get a job as a magazine editor, and that covers sports, and that sharpened up my writing skills.
So give us your reasoning on the name change.
Well, I decided to change my middle name to Maria in honor of my mother who died of cancer right after the war.
Tell us a little bit about your path to becoming one of the best-selling authors in Germany.
2 years after I took up the job as editor of the magazine, I became the best-selling author in Germany with my work All Quiet on the Western Front. I could not find a publisher right away for that, but by 1931, I sold 3.5 million copies worldwide.
Tell us a little bit about why people ridiculed your writings.
Although I had international fame from this work, people saw that it had pacifist remarks and opinions. So the Nazi Party saw them as unpatriotic, and they eventually banned and publicly burned these works in Germany for all to see.
What was the general message that you were trying to get through to your readers?
The common theme of my books is about the general shift in Europe through the generation, also known as the Lost Generation. They're obviously the people that came out of the World War I, and they were often confused and they did aimless things with their lives.
Tell us a little bit about your citizenship.
In the early 1930s, I moved to Switzerland, and in 1938, unfortunately, Germany revoked me of my citizenship there, and I was able to enter the U.S. through my personal relationship with President Roosevelt. I was naturalized in both Switzerland and the U.S., and I started to live between New York and Puerto Rico, Switzerland.
Tell us a little bit about your life during and after World War II.
During World War II, a tragedy occurred. My sister Alfred was executed by the Nazis, and a little bit after the war, I divorced my wife, Judith Zambona, for the second time, and then I married Paulette Goddard. From there, I went to work in Hollywood, and I became a well-known celebrity and had many friends many famous
Does your World War I experience relate to some of the other novels that you wrote?
Well, in the novel The Road Back, it describes the lost generation and how they could not adapt to the new lifestyle away from the front, and that also relates to how I was right after the war. In the novel The Three Comrades, the main character was exiled from his community, much like I was when I came back from war.
Join us on 10 Minutes with the Boys.
Special thanks to Eric Maria Remarque for his time. Join us next week on 10 Minutes with the Boys.